is Andrew-Vaughan. I'm 16 and I'm a beekeeper. The area that we're in right now used to be a swimming pool, but we've repurposed it to act as a housing area for our beehive. This right here, of course, is the beehive. You'll notice that there are two entrances. The main one is right here, and then there's a smaller one up front right here. And the bees will always know where it is because the queen of the hive is constantly releasing a pheromone into the air that tells the bees exactly where she is. What I'm doing right now with this is called a smoker. There's basically little bits of wood that are burning in here right now. So when I press this, it pushes smoke out towards the hive. What I'm doing is I'm smoking the hive, and what that does is it masks any alarm pheromones that the guard bees would be sending out, such as after a forest fire, they would not be able to, it kind of disorients them, and it also makes them start gorging on honey so that, like, if they have to evacuate their nest, they don't starve immediately, and they'll be able to kind of like set up an area different if they swarm and move the hive. So I'm about done with that right now because I was smoking it a little bit before. You'll notice that right now is about midday, which is the best time to get into a hive because most of the worker bees will be out foraging for honey, and there are the fewest number of bees in the hive. You'll also notice that my suit is white instead of black, because if it was black, they might perceive me as a black bear trying to come and steal their honey, so white is less threatening. I'm going to take the top off of the hive now. The way that we get into a beehive is through the top. So right here, here's the top, and there's an inner top of the hive right there that I'm probably going to have to pry off because the bees, they like to stick everything together with this substance called propolis. It's basically the glue that they use. Here we go. Alright, this is the inside of the hive. So each of these are called super. They're deep. There are deep, mediums, and smalls, and we have two deeps right here. Each of them have 10 frames, which if you come closer, you'll notice that these are each a frame, and I'll pull one out for you. This is a tool that we use that we can put on the side of the hive, and then when we take out frames, we can just rest them on this area so that we don't have to hold them. And I'm trying to be careful not to squish any bees, but it's going to happen to at least one or two every time you open up the hive. It's inevitable. But we try not to squish them as best as we can. This is a tool that we can use to help pry out the each of the frames because they get stuck pretty easily with the propolis that the bees make. So here we go. I'm just gonna unstick it. Ugh. There we go. Okay. And then what I can do is I can use this tool to actually take it out. Again, trying not to squish the bees. There we go. Okay. This is what a frame looks like, which is basically where they build their honeycomb. And if you are ever installing a hive, it's best if you can have any pre-existing honeycomb if you put that into the hive, because honeycomb is rather difficult to make. It takes, I think, 8 times the amount of honey. And you'll notice that the honeycomb is capped. What's inside of these is larvae, bee larvae. You'll notice, say right here, this is all capped honey. This is honey that's still in the process of being created, which is why they haven't capped it yet. But once they're finished making it, they will cap it. These remain capped until the larvae are ready to hatch out into a full worker bee.
Can we look down into the hive?
Yeah, go ahead.
How many bees are in here?
A full hive can reach approximately 60,000 bees, but this one probably only has about 20,000 since we only installed it about 3 weeks ago. Each of these bees that you see here, they're all worker bees, and they're the most common type of bee in the hive. All of them are female, and they essentially do all of the work. So they will go out and collect honey, they come back, they make the honey, they take care of the larvae, they take care of the queen, they do the guard work. They basically do all of the jobs in the hive. There are male bees, known as drones, which are larger, and I don't see any right now, but if I do find one, I'll point it out. And basically their job is just to mate with the queen. I'm gonna continue to look for a drone, but I'm gonna put these 2 frames back so my dad can help me take off the second super. These things are really surprisingly heavy, so I'm gonna let him do that and I'll take the camera. But continuing our conversation about drones, well, there's one queen in a hive. That queen is made, here we go, I'll just take this. I'll keep talking while he takes the super off. The queen is made using, it's just a regular egg until the bees feed it royal jelly. Now technically every bee is fed royal jelly at the very beginning of its larva stage, but it's taken off of royal jelly almost immediately and starts to eat what we call bee bread, which is actually fermented pollen, as well as honey. However, if they are trying to make a new queen, they will feed it only royal jelly for the entire pupa stage, and that makes the queen bee look a bit different than all of the other bees. It's a lot larger than the other ones, and it doesn't necessarily have as many stripes. We can try to find it, but it's probably going to be kind of hard to find it because, well, there are a lot of bees here, basically. The queen will mate with a drone once in the queen's lifetime, and it actually doesn't mate with the drones from its own hive. It goes on what's known as a virgin mating flight about a week after it's hatched out, and it will go to a drone congregation area somewhere in the vicinity where a large number of drones from other hives congregate, and it will mate with 10 to 15 of those drones and go back to its own hive. It mates with drones from other hives so that it has more genetic diversity, essentially, within its own hive. I'm really not seeing any drones. Are you?
Not yet.
That's okay. They aren't very common since their
Right here.
entire purpose. Aha, right there. That larger one is what's known as a drone. And interesting fact, bees are what's known as a haplodiploid species, which means that all of the female bees have 16 pairs of chromosomes. However, the drones, the male bees, will only have 16 chromosomes. They don't have pairs. So they basically only have one set of chromosomes, and they're made from unfertilized eggs. There's another drone right there. Oops. And we try not to smush them, but again, it's sometimes hard. The average lifespan of a worker bee is about 3 weeks if she's out working really hard. But like over the winter time, they can live for about half of the winter, so a couple of months. During the winter time, they'll actually kick all of the drones out since they're kind of just a waste of resources. And so the drones will starve to death, and the only bees in the hive are going to be females. Reasons why they would need to make a queen bee is if, oh my gosh, there's an ant right here. Ha, go away. Okay, is if, for example, the queen died all of a sudden, then they would have to make another queen, or if the hive was preparing to swarm. What that means is they would take, if they become a really large hive, they would swarm, they would take half of the hive and they would move to a different area and start building a new hive. If they do make a queen, they're going to actually want to make multiple in case some of them die, and whichever queen hatches out first will go and sting all of the other larvae so that all of the other queens die, so that there's only one queen. If 2 of them hatch out at the same time, they'll actually duel to the death, and whichever queen wins is considered the strongest queen, and she's the one who takes over the hive. You'll notice, I don't know if you can see, but deep, right down inside of those open cells, there are bee larvae that the bees will be taking care of at the moment, and they'll be being fed honey and pollen. My glove just got stung. I don't know if you can see there, but look at that. Right there is a little bee's stinger with the
Yeah.
with the poison
All right,
sac on the
here's
end
this
of it.
one, all right?
So if they ever do sting you, here's a word of advice. I would take something like a credit card and scrape the poison sac off, because if you don't do that, you'll get multiple doses of poison. Bees do not sting you unless they feel like they or their hive is being attacked, because if they do, they will die. It basically pulls out their internal organs. If they sting you, because the end of the stinger is barbed, they can only sting once. The queen bee, on the other hand, can sting multiple times, and wasps can sting you however many times they like. They are not the same as bees. They're predatory and they're really mean. So I would stay away from wasps because they will not die if they sting you. Wasps are actually kind of an enemy of bees. They'll often raid the beehives in order to get honey out. So that's one of the reasons why one of the jobs that guard bees do is they protect the hive against wasps. They're kind of getting agitated because we've been in here for a while. So I'm gonna put the top back on and then I will keep talking a little bit. What we're doing right now is just we're brushing the bees off the edges so that they don't get squished. You can actually, if you look right here, this is a poor little squished bee that we accidentally smushed when we were trying to put the top back on.
And how are you putting it on?
I'm putting it on diagonally so that as few bees as possible get smushed, and then I'm going to basically just move it like this so I can push any bees that are on the edges still off of the edges. You're probably wondering how the bees actually manage to make honey, which is one of the coolest, in my opinion, resources that nature can make. It never ever expires, ever. Like if we were going to go into some Egyptian tombs and find some honey, if we decrystallized it, we could still eat it. I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but we could. So basically the process is that they go out to flowers, and what they do is they'll collect the nectar. You probably know this. And then they come back to the hive and they basically spit out that nectar along with some of their own saliva, and then they start fanning it with their wings until it reaches like the exact moisture content, which is about 14 to 18% moisture. And once it reaches that specific level, they will cap it in order to help it maintain that moisture level. And the moisture level that it contains will actually determine how quickly it crystallizes. Crystallizing is just, it basically turns hard. And that will happen all the time. It's normal, and what you have to do in order to decrystallize it is just you boil a pot of water. You can put the jar itself in the pot of water, turn off the heat, and just leave it there, and it will turn back into liquid honey. In the fall, when a beekeeper wants to actually get in here and collect the honey, what we do is usually we put an extra super on top halfway through the summer that's only a honey super, and to prevent the queen from laying any eggs up in the honey super, we'll put a sort of mesh grating that is too big for the queen to get through, but the worker bees can still actually get through the grating up into the
And that's
hive.
called an excluder?
It's called an excluder, yes, because it excludes the queen. And so the top super, they're going to fill the bottom two supers with honey first, and then they'll keep building back up into the top super once that's put on it. And we can take the top super off and just close up the hive after we take off the top super. The bees will always be able to make their way back to the hive because of the queen's pheromones that she releases. They know where she is basically at all times. So when we take out the individual frames, and what we have to do is we have to scrape the capping off of the honey, and then we put it inside of kind of a bucket that has like a frame to hold the frame in place, and then it spins it around really, really fast. It basically centrifuges it, so all of the honey flies out to the outsides of the container and then drips down into the bottom, and we get our honey and not honeycomb. We do have to strain it in order to, say, keep honeycomb out, but it's pretty pure, and bees do not ever, they keep their hives super, super neat and clean, so they don't ever defecate inside the hive. Actually, the only bee who does defecate inside the hive is the queen, and she has her attendant worker bees who come after her and like clean up after her, basically. Bees won't even die inside the hive as much as possible. They will like leave the hive and go somewhere else in order to die because they don't want to dirty up the hive. bees are really, really important because they pollinate our fruits and vegetables. They actually are responsible for pollinating approximately a third of the fruits, vegetables, and nuts that you eat on a daily basis. The issue is that in North America, since about 1940, they've dropped 50% in population. They've also dropped in population in Europe, although they have experienced rises in Asia, Africa, South America, and Oceania. But of course, the bees in Asia are not going to fly over here to pollinate your crops. So we need to have enough of our bees here whenever possible. One of the weirdest reasons why we're losing hives, we haven't actually figured out why, but it's called colony collapse disorder, and it's basically when all of the bees inside of a hive just mysteriously fly off and then never come back. We don't really know what's causing this, but there could be some triggers, like some suggested ones have been pesticides, or if the hive is infested with mites. Another really big issue is mites they're just basically tiny little organisms on the bees, and what they do is they eventually kill a lot of the bees, and sometimes you'll come in after a winter, and if they're infested with mites, you'll just open it up and they're all dead. It's really sad, and it's been happening very frequently in the United States. And I mean, we try our best to keep them mite-free, but it's relatively difficult. Also, there's been it's mostly in South America, but now it's gotten up into the southern United States, is Africanized bees. So basically, when a queen from one of our regular hives mates with drones from an African hive. This actually started as an experiment in Brazil, but it's gotten way out of hand. And the production are Africanized bees, and they're also known as killer bees because they're so aggressive. They have killed over 1,000 humans in South America. So we're doing our best to prevent our bees from becoming Africanized by preventing our queens from mating with any Africanized drones. But that's another issue that's threatening bee populations in North America. I suppose the moral of this entire story is that bees are a really truly incredible species, and they're worth protecting. They have one of the most complicated communication systems of any species other than primates, which are humans and apes. So they do these dances in order to communicate exactly where flowers are, such as how far they are from the hive and what direction they're in. It's complicated and really amazing, and I think the more that I learn about bees, the more that I love them. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't been able to tell you in this video just because of time constraints, but I would really suggest either going out and researching more about them or potentially becoming a beekeeper, because they are a really incredible species, and they are something that we really need to protect and learn to love and not be afraid of them because they're awesome. Thanks. Bye.